Okay. The problem is fraud in our election, or really that we can't trust our system. Maybe you can't trust it because of the history of our country with and the adjustments we've had to make and the failure on multiple occasions to make the right adjustments in our system. Okay. And then on our side, it's, well, now there's people purposely manipulating that system and taking advantage of that system that you don't like or agree with, that you said is flawed. You're saying it's flawed. And now we're now seeing evidence in a different way that we can perceive from our perspective. I'm just talking as a white man because that's the conversation right now. Now we're seeing evidence from our perspective, right, of the same thing you guys have been talking about, but we couldn't see it from your perspective because we don't live through your eyes. But now, like you said earlier about, living through some, a Southern person's eyes because you get to know them. It's like now we can see it through our eyes. We can see the same problem in a different way. But still, the problem is trusting the integrity of our system.
Of the government and the system, yes.
And so the enemy is the government. And so this is why...
Hold on.
I want to answer the first question.
Okay.
Okay, welcome to another episode of Civil Disagreement. My name's Kevin Beers, and my co-host, Michael Green, is with us. Today, we are going to talk about the past week's event, and just put it into context. Congress was called together to certify the Electoral College vote, and in the process, there was a rally of Trump supporters, and there was a break-in into the building, and those were the events of the last week. So we're going to talk about that. Today we have a guest on our show. His name is Chris Stout, and I'll give you a little background on him. He grew up in basically a middle working class family. He became a single dad at a very young age, and basically joined the workforce at that time, doing multiple different jobs, from roofing to being a waiter, fixing cars, just a multitude of different things. In his life, he had a motorcycle accident in which he broke his neck, and it took him out for nearly 9 months, and he had to come back from that. And during that process, it steered him to becoming an entrepreneur, and he's now in the financial industry. One of the things that Chris had told me was that he's always striving to be better. And that's where we're going to pick up. So welcome to the show, Chris. Good to have you here with us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Okay, so Michael, you want to start out?
Welcome, Chris. Thank you for taking up our invitation to be on the show. We definitely are happy to have you on here. So I guess I'll just start it off. What did you think? What were you thinking while the events on Tuesday, while that was going on? What did you think? Or, well, first, let me ask you, are you a Trump supporter? And do you support, the whole thing that happened Tuesday?
Gotcha. So it depends on, well, the simple answer is it depends, right? So with being a Trump supporter, I voted for Trump.
Yes.
So I voted for Trump. So now, would I label myself as a Trump supporter? I don't think that's, short answer is yes, but that also does not mean I think he's a perfect person or that I support every single thing that he does. But what it means is that I support him enough, and enough of what he does more than our other choices, based on what I can measure in truth, and enough for me to have voted for him. So, and the reason I feel like I have to disclaim that is only because people get so charged by when people don't explain what they mean. And I think that anybody who supports a candidate and enough to go and vote should be able to back up why.
Okay.
Why they support them. You see what I'm saying? And it doesn't.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I guess so we understand that. I guess your background now is the financial industry. I am prior military. It is just a you can call it blue collar or whatever, but it's the military thing to vote Republican. Okay, most of all my people I served with, even gentlemen that were hardcore Democrats, once they got in the military and we started talking, I've know guys that are Democrats and they still voted for like Bush.
Why do you think that is?
The reason that is that there is a core consensus amongst a lot of the blue collar workers in America that economically is just a good thing to vote for Republicans because they believe in like, uh, uh, big military, government contracts, all the rest of that other stuff. So,
did your life get better as a result of you serving in the military?
I would say yes. I mean, I just think my life got better, not because I served in the military. I think my life got better because, like any hardworking American understands that you have to take responsibility for your own success. Like what your responsibilities are. So if you have children, it's your responsibility to find a way to take care of those children. If you get married, there's a responsibility for you to take care of a household now.
Right.
Once you become of age, rites of passage, you're an adult now, you have to find a way to, take care of yourself. You have to have life skills, whether or not your parents passed them down to you or not, or taught you anything. When you hit the world, you still have to take care of yourself. So,
and do you feel like the military kind of shined a brighter light on that for you?
No and yes. What the military did was the military allowed me to see the advantages and disadvantages of America itself. Before, I could not see that when I was growing up in Baltimore because I was only around and lived in one culture. Even though Baltimore has a bunch of cultures in it, just like New York or Chi-Town, or Detroit, it was still, when you're young, you hang around your own people, your own tribe, call it what you want to. So even though you're introduced to other cultures in America, you still are used to your own culture.
Kind of have
so
like tribalism kind of thing.
Yeah. So what ends up happening, you're still like a product of your environment that way. So
why do you think? Can I ask you? I want to ask you something on that.
Yeah.
Just before you lose it, because I don't want to lose it. Why do you think that when people are left kind of completely to their own devices, basically, why do you think that is that we kind of naturally kind of find our tribe and kind of have that thing? You see what I'm saying? Like, do you know?
Yeah. Well, and like I said, what I found in the military was that depending on what your philosophy, whether it's based on religion or something your uncle told you, your mother told you, whatever what was instilled in you, when you go out into the world and you're introduced to other stimuli, other stuff, it's up to you to accept that or not. So what I found when I got into the military is that there were a lot of people that wanted to be with people like them. They didn't want to entertain other cultures. They didn't want to entertain other languages. They didn't want to entertain anything outside of their culture.
They had to.
You see what I'm saying? They just didn't want to. And a lot of it was through fear and ignorance. I mean, it's just fact. Like if I walk into a room and I'm the dot on the page and it's nothing but white Americans in there and I walk out, that's my fault. Right. That's my fault I walked out. Okay. Just like if a white American walks into a room and there's nothing but black people in there and he walks out, that's his fault. He walked out.
Right.
Okay. So, I guess to answer your question is just fear, just closed-mindedness. So while I was in the military, I got a chance to talk to and see what other cultures were about and dispel a lot of the just basic stuff that a lot of people are born and raised to believe that comes a part of their politics, so to speak, or their philosophy when they're in the world. Okay. So for me, I can personally say I wasn't raised to think that white people were racist, but because of certain things that I kept seeing and because I did not live in the South, I was like, okay, so a white guy with a Southern accent or white people with Southern accents, are they racist? Are they in the KKK? I found out that these young guys that I served in the Army with before before I transferred over to the Navy. When I was in the Army, it was Confederate flags all over the place. But when I found out, when I engaged those young men, that a lot of them didn't even think they were racist because they didn't think like that. They were just raised or they were taught to believe that the whole Confederate flag thing was, oh, it's a Southern thing and you're supposed to be proud to be a Southerner.
Well, hold on. So do, other than the Confederate, like if you never saw any Confederate flags around them, would
Yes.
you have ever had any other indication that they were racist by their actions?
Well, a lot of the guys, I can tell you like this. Most of the gentlemen that I met, and I even known some, some black people from the South that still, have the Confederate flag or whatever. Most of the people that I met that have that on their truck or use that or still tote that were not racist. Okay. But after a lot of things have transpired, and I'm still talking to a few of them, a lot of them understand what that means for for people outside of their culture, because because at the end of the day, America was built a certain way, and that's just facts. It just is. And so if you are part of the majority that got to make the rules of what a symbol means, and that's what you're doing with it, and you got other people on the other side saying, hey, that symbol was like really derogatory for us. Like it means something. It's not really positive for us.
Right.
That's up to you to take it into account. Now, if you're in a free market where it's supposed to be inclusive and everybody is supposed to be doing, getting along with each other, why would you want to bring that divisiveness in? That's my question. So trying to get back to the politics of stuff, I'm not saying a person can't be racist. I'm saying, does it serve them well to be racist in an inclusive environment where you got 50 people unlike yourself in that same environment that you have to work in?
Yeah. So like back to the other question, like other than you, just from this experience, this example, other than you like seeing a Confederate flag with the specific people that you're talking about that in the military with you, was there any other indication other than that symbol that they had possession of?
Oh, definitely.
Like
Language, how they speak, yes, how they act. Some guys that were curious were racist and they didn't even know it, because the problem, but they found out because of their curiosity and wanting to know something outside of what they were taught to believe. But I can honestly tell you, like it was very easy to spot people that were just racist. It was just easy.
So do you think that the military giving you exposure to those people helped you grow as a person?
Oh, definitely. And I think and I don't think it's just a military thing. I just think when people go to college, when people go to Job Corps, when people, get international jobs and they go outside of the country to work, whether you're 18 years old or 40,
larger sample sizes and kind of mix together and get to know each other. And the military is kind of like a petri dish.
It's a melting pot of the USA. I mean, you get to see like a microcosm of little different spots. Or if I met a dude from Galveston, Texas, can I say that all people from Texas are like him? No, but I still get to see like a little piece of Texas through his eyes.
Yeah. Got it. So do you feel like the military? So you said it ultimately helped you. It
did. It was way more. It was a way more of a positive than it was a negative. Most of all my experiences in my life that I've had outside of Baltimore City, from where I grew up at, were more positive than negative. I think the problem is, and again, I can only say that because how I'm wired. I'm an outgoing person. I like to, learn. I like to, do different things. But getting back to the whole Tuesday thing, what I'm finding is that a lot of people are closed-minded and don't want to listen to facts or point of views of other sides. Right. So it's not that, and like I said, just for me, I can't speak for anybody else. It's not that I'm telling somebody we need to make a law against racist people, or we need to get rid of racist people. We need to make them get fired and all the rest of that stuff. Like me personally, that's not what I'm about. My thing is that how can a solution come if nobody wants to sit down and talk about it? Mm-hmm. And what kind of angered me Tuesday was that here it is. You have a whole lot of Americans that will deny me and my, when I say my people, I'm talking about black and brown people. They will vehemently deny our voice or discussion with us as rhetoric, or you're just trying to be a victim, like all the code words that you hear, and then turn around and then say something like an election was stolen from them, when you have been hearing my people speak about that since slavery.
Well,
Like that has been a talking point for black and brown people for hundreds of years, to the point that the government had to make legislation because of it.
well, I just have
like 3 separate times.
Because like, okay, so to make this, to make that into a race thing, it would have to mean that there were no African American people on, or people that aren't racist and like African American people on the side of that's claiming, you know, fraud, and it would mean that all of those people are on the other side that are being, you know, it's fraud. But I don't think that it's saying that. I mean, do you think that it's that people that
no, I'm not calling all the protesters racist. This is what I'm saying.
No, but I'm saying, like, I guess my question is, how does the side being accused of possible fraud,
Mm-hmm.
how does that side, in the example you gave me, how does that side represent African Americans as a whole?
Oh, okay. I got the talking point for you.
Because there's would you agree that it's a fact that there's African Americans and white people and a mixture of people on both sides politically that voted for Trump and Biden, right?
Yeah, there is a mixture.
There's a mixture on both.
There are plenty of black Republicans and conservatives. Yes.
Right. So there's a mixture on both sides. Yes. So if there's a mixture on both sides, and there's a mixture of people on this side, all types of different people claiming that the other side possibly committed fraud, how does bringing race into that logically make sense? And also, how is it productive?
Okay. The reason it's productive is because if racism exists, it just exists. If I'm a black man and I go and get a job with a white man, and for me to keep my job, I don't want to act like racism exists when it truly does. That doesn't mean racism no longer exists. That just means I'm a black man. I got a good job working for a white man, and I'm going to tell everybody else that he's not racist, or I don't have a problem with racism because I want to keep my job. Now, where does that power PowerPoint come from? The history of America is built on that. It's just built on that. Look at the facts.
Built on what?
Okay, so you have America gets set up, and its chief financial capitalistic endeavor is slavery. That's how they made most of their money. They made most of their money on the backs of slaves. Okay, slaves were not people. You had 3 classes in this country. You were either a free man, indentured servant, or you was a slave. That was it. That's how it worked. Okay, so we get to the what? Civil War. Civil War's over. Black people are free. Okay.
Well, black people are free, or slaves are free?
Well, the slaves were free. I'm sorry. The slaves were free. Okay. So what ends up happening is you have all this literature saying that slaves were free. And then you have, after the slaves were free, they still couldn't vote. Black men couldn't vote, black women couldn't vote, whatever. So then after the first Reconstruction, you have the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment to go into effect, and you're telling black people you're really free. So hold on, we weren't free after the Emancipation Proclamation. No, you really weren't free, but now you're free, and black men can vote. You see where I'm coming from? Yeah. It's this country has a history of only treating black people a certain kind of way. There are no amendments written for Chinese people. There's no amendments written for white people. There's no amendments. All these amendments that I'm talking about, they're all written because of how black people are being treated in this country.
Does the amendment specifically say black people, or does it say slavery?
Slaves, and then black men.
And were all slaves in America black at that time?
Yes, there were no such thing as white slaves, and there's no fact of that. There are no boats in any of the books where they went to Ireland or Europe and went and got white slaves and put their names in the books. There were no white people on the selling block in Virginia. That is not a fact. Nobody can pull a book and find that anywhere. That is a talking point that was just made up because people just want to believe that because white people were treated poorly, oh, they must have been slaves. Okay, so where's all the evidence? Because you have to understand, Americans during that time, because they didn't think anything was wrong with slavery, they documented it so well. They really did. They had books and ledgers and everything documented. What slaves came on, what ships, lot numbers, and everything. And there's no white people. There's just not. There's no ships going back and forth to Europe to bring slaves to white Europeans here, chained up in ships, lined up, like they did Africans. That wasn't a trade. That wasn't a thing.
Have you ever looked into, so hypothetically, if there
Yes.
was documented history of there also being white slaves?
There were white slaves. It wasn't a thing in America. It was a thing in Europe. That's what I'm saying. American slavery was purely black commerce. It was African commerce. It was the African slave. Again, it's documented very well. Were there white slaves? Yes. In Europe, there was plenty of white slaves in Europe.
Do you think that all slavery is bad, or just
slavery in general is bad. I just say that as a Christian.
Okay. So
yeah.
Slavery in general is bad. All slavery is bad, right?
Yes.
Okay. And so in our Constitution, in the amendment, it abolished all slavery, not for any specific person, and it said that all slavery is now abolished, and it's corrected.
Yes. But it said all men were created equal, and black men were still slaves. So please don't do the play on words.
Right. No, I got you. I
Okay.
agree with that. So, I mean, that's what it says. That's fact, right? So, so it said all men were created equal, and that's
yes, while owning black people as slaves.
Right.
Because
so
white people believed that black people were not human. We were subhuman. We were not men. So if you rationalize that argument, no matter what happens, there is a culture of America that is teaching its children and its wives and its everything that black people are just not human.
Right.
So no matter what laws get written by progressive politicians, you have a whole culture of America that has learned and believe that black people are not human.
So
thus, all the friction that you see over the years of black people trying to ascertain their God-given First Amendment right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, because you just, even through states' rights, all the rest of the stuff, you just have all these people that were Jim Crow. I mean, that's just factual history, and no other group of people in this country were treated like that outside of Native Americans, again, because that's a whole nother issue. Yeah. But no other group of people were treated like that except for black people. The Civil Rights Act was for black people. It was not for Italians. It was not for Europeans. It was not for Jews. It was not for Muslims. The Civil Rights Act was for black people.
Absolutely. So I have two questions. So my first question is, at the time that slavery existed in America, what did the rest of the world look like? Didn't the rest of the world also practice slavery at that time and exchange all types of different slaves across all over the entire world?
Well, slavery was everywhere.
At that time that slavery existed in America,
slavery was everywhere.
And in America, so slavery was everywhere on the entire planet. So is it fair to say that slavery was not an American thing? It was a worldly thing at that time?
No, I'm not saying that slavery was an American thing. I'm saying that African slavery was an American thing, because.
But slavery in whole was a worldly thing at that time.
Yes.
And there were white slaves on other parts of the planet, and there were black slaves here in America, which is why that's the American, issue here.
Yes, because in Africa, you weren't necessarily a slave if you lost a war. You were just conquered.
Right.
Same thing in Europe. If the Vikings went down and conquered your village, They claimed you and you worked for whoever you worked for. If they wanted to kill all the able-bodied men, they killed them. They took the women and the children, and you were a subclass of of the Viking tribe. But
that's kind of worse than slavery. I mean, they're going to
yeah, it is what it is. Yeah. So, but yeah, that is what it is. In this country, they did not practice that with any other group of people other than Africans.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the problem with that. You see what I'm saying? It wasn't a thing where we were at war. My tribe is against your tribe. Guess what? We won. We're going to subjugate you now and integrate you into our tribe. Right. The whole slavery thing was e-commerce.
We both agree that that's wrong, right?
Yes, it is wrong. It is wrong.
No matter what color you are, it happened. It was black people, but no matter what color you are, that is wrong.
Yes.
Okay. So let's move this up to Tuesday.
Oh, okay, Tuesday. Yeah, okay. So let's move this up to Tuesday. My point, what I was saying, Chris, of that is you have the Black Civil Rights Movement for, let's just go with after the Voters' Right Acts of 1965. Let's start from there. The Voters' Right Act of 1965 basically had to put in play that, look, everybody can equally vote. You cannot put voter suppression in place to stop black people or women from voting. Basically, everybody should be able to vote. Mm-hmm. Okay, so what ends up happening is after that's passed, you still have this discussion, specifically in the South, of voter suppression, because there are certain things that a lot of Southerners didn't have access to be able to vote. And that was an issue. And nobody was looking at that because they really, at that time, they still didn't want black people to vote. So that's where the argument for voter suppression or voter fraud came from. It was always a black civil rights, movement thing.
So you're
saying get all the way, huh?
So you're saying that suppressing certain people's votes was the original form of voter fraud in the United States, and it was suppressing the votes of black people and women.
Yes. Yes.
Okay,
so we're trying and so, my point is quick. If only black people are putting that message out or trying to get that talking point to Congress to get people to look at what's going on in their state or their locality, and that's a thing. How do you wait till 2020 till when a president loses an election and you co-opt that movement and then say, oh, now we want to entertain this point? Well, why do you want to entertain it now? Because we've been bringing you that point for our people, for this side of America. We've been talking about those things for us because it affects us since 1965.
Well,
why now do you want to entertain that conversation because it affects these people? Do you understand what I'm saying now?
Yeah. No, I understand what you're saying. And
okay.
So so what I understand of what you're saying is that suppressing anyone's votes is a form of voter fraud that affected black people and women, suppressing those votes. And technically that is voter fraud because we're suppressing voices that should be heard if we're equal, right?
Yes.
And so the question is, when was that corrected? When was that corrected to where there's no
it was literally never corrected.
So there's still
so what ends up happening is so now, so I'm gonna tell you, because it was never corrected, you now have, well, if it's the only game in town, we have to learn how to play. So if I live in a place where I have to learn how to survive and the rules are written against me, I now have to learn that game so I can play that game so I can survive in that area. So what ends up happening is, what you see is, because of corruption, because nobody wanted to entertain that argument, a group of people got together and learned how to play the game. Mm-hmm. And that's what happened. So they used the same process that was being used against other people to suppress them, to say, because the country is changing and it's growing. You a certain people that are the majority that had power, it's not that anymore. You know, the same people that sat on boards and drew lines and made up these ridiculous voting rules and purge voter registration, they're not in power anymore. So now you have a replacement for that, and they're making, huh?
Purge voter registration. Is that how they suppress the votes of Black people and women?
Yes, yes. And that is and that's actually on record on how they do that and what they did at what times and what states and counties.
I believe that. And so was that problem solved? You just said that
no, the problem wasn't solved. What happened was when, like I said, every single time the conversation came up and the evidence came up, it was, well, that person that did that had the right to do it. Mm-hmm. Oh, okay, I got you. So it's not voter suppression. It's this one individual's right as his job to be able to do that legally. Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. So what we have to do is we have to find out what we can do legally so we cannot let that affect us. And that's what happened during this election. And because it worked, now the group of people that it now affects want to say, oh, the election was stolen and it's voter fraud. Oh, but when this group of people were trying to tell you that the system was messed up, y'all didn't want to hear that since 1965. Okay. But now you want to talk about it. And again, the people that want to talk about it don't want to entertain our point of view. It has nothing to do with us, even though the original argument was us. Right. They want to talk about it because they only care about how it affected them.
Right. So
that's what I have a problem with.
So that's understandable. So I guess my first thing is one way to cause fraud in voting is to suppress certain people's votes. Would you agree that a different way to commit fraud in voting is to add illegitimate votes? And that would be kind of the opposite, but two different ways to perform fraud. You can either take votes away, which causes a issue with the votes, obviously, because you're taking voices away, or adding voices that aren't supposed to be there, that don't exist, fraudulent voices, counterfeit votes, basically, is a different way to cause fraud in the voting system. Would you agree?
Yes.
And so I think what the argument is, I think it's interesting that your argument, because you actually just said that there's voter fraud. It's just that your version, and from your perspective of correct me if I'm wrong, from the African-American suppression point of view, is that's the cause of the fraud. And on this side, the cause is a influx of additional counterfeit ballots and things like that.
Well, I'm not saying that because I'm speaking from a point of fact. Voter purging was fact.
Right.
People that are in Congress admitted they already did it. People that had those voter committee positions admitted that they did that. And they admitted that they did. It's just like it's just like somebody admitting to slavery. Right. Of course, it's legal. I did that. It's nothing wrong with slavery. So those people that we say voter suppression, but they're saying, no, I did my job. So like I said, we're trying to entertain an argument that is affecting us negatively. Nobody wants to hear it. All of a sudden, an election is lost. Now we want to say, oh, well, it's fraud because all these votes were, okay, first of all, where's your proof? And then once you have your proof, are we just going to talk about this issue because it affected you? Or now are we going to have a civil discussion and we're going to bring these people in because they was talking about it first. They've been talking about it for like 50 years. You guys have just been talking about it for 2 years.
So
or a year or the last 6 months. So how is it fair that we're going to skip over the 50-year conversation of people trying to get the same thing looked at, and we're just only going to entertain this group of Americans, period?
Yeah. So I have two. So that would be, I can see how that's frustrating. So I guess it brings two other questions up though. In the emotion coming from what you just said, it still kind of stems from a place assuming that all of the people calling this different type of fraud, which is counterfeit fraud, not suppressing voices.
Okay.
It's like you're making it a race thing, is assuming that nobody on this side that's saying that is black is one, you see what I'm saying? But then my other question though is, so I guess in order to say one side is racist or there's racial issues in that this type of voter fraud is being heard more than this other type, was heard,
Yes.
number one, we would have to assume that all people on this side that are disgruntled with this new type of or different type of voter fraud are not black. And then the other thing is we would also have to assume that if that's the case, I guess my question is, or if it is a race thing, then the real question is who owns the black vote?
Okay, so there's no such thing as owning a black vote, just like you can't own a white vote.
So then we couldn't
That's
say
a myth.
one side.
Okay,
So we can't make this a race thing then.
yeah, we can make it a race thing, and I'm gonna tell you how we can make it a race thing because America was born out of racism. Period. Okay, so let's talk about classism because the conservatives and financial industry love talking about classism. Okay, so if I set my classes up and I say there are three classes, you're either a free man, an indentured servant, or a slave. That is the class of citizenship in America. So then everybody goes out and goes, see, America was classism. It wasn't racist. So then I say, I look at your class table and I go, in America, who was a slave? Oh, only black people. Oh, so your classism structure is racist.
Right.
Period. End of story.
Well, it was racist, yes.
Okay. You can't say it was racist because America has proven that it could still do stuff to black people, even though black people were supposedly free, like Black Wall Street, Rosewood, Florida.
I'm not disagreeing with any of that, but what
but you understand where I'm coming from. We can't just talk about an intellectual point on say that, oh, nothing can be racist unless it's 100% white against 100% black. That's not how this works. How it works is there is a racist construct, and just because you have black people that don't want to fight it and want to go along just to get a paycheck or just to make their lives easier does not mean the racist construct went away. Like I said, if I work for a racist boss and I don't do anything to call him out or to protect the other black employees at that job site, that does not mean that he is not racist. Just because I work for him and I go on a record and say, oh, Mr. Bob is not racist. I've been his vice president for the last 30 years. That doesn't mean that the construct is not racist.
With the events of like Tuesday with the Capitol, there's a lot to unpack, and it's not one dimensional. There's a lot of different points of view to unpack. And ultimately what we all want, I think you would agree, is we all want to get to the truth.
Yes.
And your truth is your truth and my truth is my truth, but somewhere in the middle is the truth.
Yes.
And so I guess first,
what I find funny is that my truth includes your truth. Mm-hmm. There's nowhere in America where black people can't go where they don't have to acclimate to white culture or white rules or white history. It's just not. So Chris Stout can go anywhere in America. You can go to Baltimore City and go into an urban area in Baltimore and not have to worry about black culture at all because just how things are set up. And this is what I mean when I say that.
Well,
man, I'll give you an example just real quick.
Okay.
How much infrastructure in this country is owned by anybody that's not a white person? Communication company, power, fuel, anything that runs this company, this country, how much of it is owned by black people? And I'm not talking about public stocks. I'm talking about literally owned.
I don't know.
And paid for.
I don't know that statistic, but I
can tell you it's zero.
Okay.
There are no nuclear plants, power plants, fuel companies, or telecommunication companies owned by black families or black people in general. None. Oprah is the richest black woman, and you can't buy cable from her. You can look at her TV channel on a white-owned cable station, but you can't buy nothing from her.
Why do you think that is?
Because that's the way the infrastructure is set up. It's not that she doesn't want to own that, because Byron Allen, while Obama was in office, went to the Supreme Court trying to get that changed. It's a lot to unpack, Chris. We can really get into this, but I literally have a whole bunch of facts that show you how the infrastructure in this country is literally just owned by white men or white families. And we literally got to go to court to get rid of try to get the vote down monopoly laws or something like that.
So how is so both of the political candidates are both white though, right?
Both of the political candidates, what?
Donald Trump and Joe Biden, like they're both white.
Yes.
Right. I'm not going to get into the vice presidents or whatever because it could be argued that, well, yeah, Kamala Harris is black. Some people would say she's half black. Some people would say that Joe Biden only picked her because she's black and he's trying to use her to get the black vote. So there's a lot of stuff to unpack there. But
yes, there is. Yeah, I agree with you.
The two guys that are running for office are both white men, and the last president was a black man. And I guess, I would think that the African American community, not the Democrat or the Republican, because there's African American and white people on both sides.
Yes.
I would think, though, that the African American community would be kind of questioning the validity of the vote count when Joe Biden got more votes, not just more votes than any president in history, but he got more votes in this election than Barack Obama got. And I mean, that's crazy. That's a lot of
well, you have to look at how many people can vote now that couldn't vote before while Obama was in office and while Trump was in office. That's you're looking at.
Can more black people vote now than when Obama was in office?
I mean, yeah, but it's just more white people voting, all these liberals. At the end of the day, people have to,
just more people in general.
Yeah, well,
just more people in general.
With the mail-in vote, that opened it up to a lot of people being able to vote without actually having to step outside their homes.
Right.
That seemed to make a somewhat of a difference too.
I just think in general, just because the population grew, and out of that, you have people that were like 16, 17 or whatever, 18 or whatever. There was a lot of people that couldn't vote during Obama's administration. And then for that election, they just didn't want to vote at all because, what they did to Obama, and there was no black person running. Bernie didn't make it. So a lot of those people weren't. Yeah.
Do you think that black votes are still being suppressed, and maybe women votes too could be included in that?
Not with the way the election is running now, with the new rules that are in place.
Like this year, or like in the past maybe few
No,
years?
this year. The last presidential election, there was, and this is what I was talking about the voter purge. The last presidential election, there were people showing up to vote and they were being denied to vote because what happened was there was a specific county in I want to say in North Carolina. It was in the papers. Gentleman did the voter purge thing because he could. And what he did was when he sent out the email, not the email, but the mail out to all the people that he purged from the list, supposedly, it only went out to certain constituents in certain districts. And most of them were Republican. Okay. None of the Democrats that were purged, which happened to be mostly black people, got the instructions or got the notification that you've been purged because we're doing a new process and you have to re-register to vote. So you have all these old people that are showing up to vote being told, no, you're not registered here. You can't vote because they just didn't re-register.
Yeah, that happened a lot this year too. I heard a lot of cases with that where it's different groups of people than before, but still happening. So I guess can I ask you a question? Like, would you agree that all slavery is evil, no matter who it's done to?
Yes.
Would you agree that all voter fraud would be wrong and would diminish the integrity of our voting system, whether it's suppression or counterfeit votes on both sides?
Yes.
Okay. If your reason for wanting voter fraud fixed is suppression, and my reason is because I believe there's counterfeit votes, but we both want voter fraud fixed.
Yes.
Why do you care what my reason is? Because I don't care what your reason is. I just want us to both.
Well, it's not that we
common enemies. So why don't we just solve the problem? How is it productive to fight over our reasons when they're both aiming at a similar problem, just in different?
Well, we're not fighting over reason. The problem is that, again, the other side is still not being entertained in the conversation. It's only about, we're going to discuss this issue because this issue affects me, and that's it. If you literally talk to a lot of people that, like myself, that want to do the work, and sit down and talk to people in a position of authority to help fix what we're bringing to the table, you will find that we entertain all points of view. This is not an extreme left thing. Again, because if it was, America wouldn't have a history of adopting all these amendments and acts to cater to the fact that there's a disenfranchised group of people that America has done stuff to.
So are you saying that the fact that we've amended things to abolish slavery proves that there was issues with the foundation of our country?
Oh, I absolutely. But that didn't fix it, because what happened was it was being entertained and then it was fixed. What happened? The powers that be went behind it, coerced it, corrupted it, and turned it into something else. Hence, you got Jim Crow and all the rest of that other stuff. So now we have to go back and we have to revisit the same issue that we thought we fixed, and we have to try to fix it again. So then it gets corrupted again. But again, it's only affecting one group of people. We have never seen it affect anybody else outside of that one group of people until this year on this election. Nobody had a problem with voter fraud and voter suppression that was a Republican. Not one soul. I promise you, if you try to go look for literature on a Republican trying to bring voter suppression and voter fraud to the forefront before Trump got in office, you will not find it. You will not find any kind of movement, any kind of literature, any kind of bill proposal, nothing.
Okay, so I don't know that, but I'm going to agree with you and say that that's true, even though I don't know that, because you sound like you know that. So I'm just going to say, okay, I'll accept that.
Yes.
So still, I guess the question is, do we both want to solve the problem of being able to me, it's like ultimately like the problem on both sides is now it's gotten to the conservatives, right?
Yes.
Where before it was minority Black people and women too, I've heard. So women and Black people, right?
Yes. And
now it's affected other people. So now they're mad, but it's kind of like, well, why weren't you mad before with us? Right? Where were you when we needed you if you really cared before? Right? But my question is, what if we just kind of transcend that and look from a higher perspective and solve the problem rather than pointing fingers? Like, okay, the problem's here. Okay, the problem is fraud in our election, or really that we can't trust our system. Maybe you can't trust it because of the history of our country with and the adjustments we've had to make and the failure on multiple occasions to make the right adjustments in our system. Okay, and then on our side, it's, well, now there's people purposely manipulating that system and taking advantage of that system that you don't like or agree with, that you said is flawed. You're saying it's flawed, and now we're now seeing evidence in a different way that we can perceive from our perspective. I'm just talking as a white man because that's the conversation right now. Now we're seeing evidence from our perspective, right, of the same thing you guys have been talking about, but we couldn't see it from your perspective because we don't live through your eyes. But now, like you said earlier about, living through some, a Southern person's eyes because you get to know them. It's like now we can see it through our eyes. We can see the same problem in a different way. But still, the problem is trusting the integrity of our system.
Of the government and the system, yes.
And so the enemy is the government. And so this is
But
why.
hold on.
I want to answer the first question. If the root of all the issue is that we can't trust the government and we can't trust the system, whether it's because of the history or because of right now manipulation of the votes, whatever it is, if the root of all of it is that we can't trust the government and the system, and there's two candidates and they're both white men.
Yes.
That's what it is this year. Before it was, Obama, all that. But right now it's two white men. Okay.
Yes.
So we can't do the race thing with them. But one of them wants bigger government, more government control, and one of them wants less. And we already know we can't trust the government. Why in the world would anybody logically go to the person who wants more government that we can't trust?
Okay. Because again, the reason it looks like they want more government is because social issues have to get addressed. It's just that simple. Again,
and we need the government to solve
America has a history of voting all this stuff into the Constitution. Why is that? Because of social injustice.
So
Period.
social issues need to be addressed, but the question is, do we need the government to address it, or is this how we address it, by individually?
So the problem is you can't do it through that, because when it was left up to the devices of states' rights and stuff, look what the states did.
Mm-hmm.
That's the problem. That's the reason why the government wrote all this stuff into the Constitution, because the states couldn't do it. Because again, culture kept winning out. This is a good example. Where I come from in Baltimore, they were hard on drug abusers or drug addicts. Being a drug addict was a crime. It wasn't a chemical dependency. It was a crime. You didn't get help. You got arrested. All of a sudden, the opium epidemic hit. And now drug abuse or opium addiction is a sickness. Why is it a sickness? Because you have a certain group of people in America that are now affected. Who's that certain group of people? I mean, I'm not trying to make it a race thing, but that's just the facts. The numbers show that. I could
actually tell you from my perspective, from a business perspective, I could tell you that I think the primary reason that's becoming a sickness is because people are starting to find out that the opioid pandemic, if we can call it a pandemic, I don't know if that's the right word, but the opioid crisis, I guess.
Yes.
People are starting to realize that the root of that crisis is coming more and more from our pharmaceutical industry, which is ultimately controlled by our government. And so when the fingers start getting pointed at the government shifts language.
But so then I have a question for you.
To serve, to basically hide it from the masses. So it's basically to kind of shove it under the rug. They shift the language.
Yes.
So now it's a sickness. And because it's a sickness, we're going to help you. And again, the government is the answer, of course, because they're going to help you. But really, it's just cover their ass, for lack of better terms.
Yes. But I have a question for you. I have a question for you. Okay. So
by the way, hold on. Look, can I say one more thing?
What you got?
I am a supporter of. I voted for Trump because of what he represents in his actions. Now here's the thing. I'll say this too. If Donald Trump, with his work ethic and his policies and his actions, had Obama's swag, he'd be the perfect president. Would you agree?
But he doesn't have any work ethic. The problem is that I'm trying to figure out where all these smart people's discernment is. And I'm going off of fact. I'm not going off of my opinion of the man's character. I'm just going off of pure fact. Okay. If you take Donald Trump's adult working career and put it against Obama's working career, regardless of race, Obama's going to get hired by anybody every single time. You're going to overlook Trump. Trump has all these failed, bankrupt business decisions.
Well,
okay. Now,
I know how bankruptcy works from a business perspective,
and it's fine. I'm not trying to tell you it's a wrong thing. I'm not trying to demonize the man for it. I get that him and his lawyers know how the American law works. I get that. What I'm saying is Elon Musk doesn't have that. And that's fact. Oprah Winfrey doesn't have that. That's fact. Bill Gates doesn't have that. That's fact.
But they're in different industries. So can I break this down really quick? Because I'm a business guy.
Okay.
Because I really want to break this down.
Yes, I'm listening. I'm listening.
All right. So bankruptcy is well, first of all, if you were in a really bad situation with, you just dug yourself in a hole from whatever happened, maybe it was out of your control or in your control, and you personally had to claim bankruptcy for that, because strategically it was going to get you into a better position. Do you want the freedom to be able to do that? Do you think that should be available to people?
Definitely.
Okay. So in business, what's interesting is that people who own businesses, in order to protect themselves, their personal life and property and all that, and family, and shield themselves from the liability of the risk they're taking on, they will start business entities like LLCs and C Corps and S Corps and all these things, right? And that is a shield between the individual business person and the risk and project that they're taking on, which risk meaning probably debt and, things can go wrong and it's a project and all that, right? Now, certain industries have to take on more financial risk in order to get more reward. So Donald Trump, his industry, Oprah's industry, is entertainment. right? So that's a little bit different. Bill Gates's industry is technology. Elon Musk's is technology. Donald Trump's industry, though, is real estate development. And
Yes.
with real estate development, it is a constant battle for funding projects that take on a tremendous amount of risk that he needs to shield himself from. I'm not even him, just any developer, by using a business entity to shield himself between him and that project. Now, if what happens is he's going to get lenders to lend money to that project, like banks. And so let's say the bank says, okay, I'm going to loan you $20 million to build this apartment building and complex or whatever it might be, and for this development project. And he says, okay, I'll take on that project. What's my interest rate? And the bank says 7%. And as he's doing the project, right, and he thinks that's not a good deal, the bank's obviously making a lot, and all they're doing is lending the money. They're not doing the work. They're just lending, right? And that's how they're making their money. That's how the banks work. Whole nother topic. But, you know, he's borrowing that money to fund the project to get it done. The project ultimately adds value to the economy by providing maybe houses, providing whatever, and, you know, by providing jobs for the people building it, all these things. And now, if that project, right, as he's doing it, what I know about Donald Trump and this tactic is the project is all held within that entity that he built to protect himself, that company, the LLC or whatever it is, right? And that is what got the funding from the lenders. And as the project's going on, what he wants to do, of course, is pay less interest back to the lenders. He doesn't want to pay. Nobody wants to pay more interest to somebody that lends you something for a project.
Well, when you go to financial school, they teach you that interest is the devil.
That interest is the devil, right? So what he's doing is he's renegotiating with the banks, right, to try to lower that interest rate from the funding. And when they are unwilling to do that, he uses not going bankrupt, but filing bankruptcy on the deal, corporate bankruptcy, not personal bankruptcy, corporate bankruptcy on the deal, the project, with his entity going bankrupt, but it doesn't affect him because he's got the shield of the entity. Right? Anybody that understands this can do it. You can go get funding for a big deal and you can do this. So, and Donald Trump's done it because he has that kind of ambition. And so you can't say he doesn't have work ethic because he became a billionaire. And even if you start with $1 million, there's a lot of people that get $1 million and just squander it. And he turned it into $1 billion. That's awesome. But with the entity, right? The entity, what he'll do is he'll set him or anybody else, they'll say, I'm going to file bankruptcy as kind of like a, hey, well, you might want to renegotiate these interest rates with me, or I'll just bankrupt the whole deal. Because that's not fair, because we had to put up more resources. Maybe he had to put up more resources and his bottom line is affected. So he's like, well, hey, you can take some of that too by lowering the interest rate. They don't want to do that. So he says, all right, I'll just bankrupt the whole thing. I'm going to file bankruptcy as kind of like a lure to say, as a negotiating tactic. And that opens up a window of time until he has to actually go through with it, to where he can negotiate with them. And now the threat is real. And the banks are like, all right, we'll lower the interest rate. And then he says, all right, I'm going to pull that file back and let's get the project done. That's how business people and developers use bankruptcy. Now, why has he done it more often than others? Because his industry requires more lending, more financial risk. So it puts him in a position to use that tool more often than somebody like Oprah or Elon Musk would do. So you're not comparing apples to apples. And that's not a fair thing to like say, well, he used bankruptcy. Well, he uses it as a tool, and anybody could do that, right? So it's like, it's a smart tactic. Makes sense.
And I'm going to say I stand corrected in demonizing him for having all those bankruptcies. I now understand that as a good business, for good business acumen in his sector of how he does business, that's a good thing. Okay, I will give you that argument. How does that serve the public trust in a position like the president or public service? Now, if you can explain that to me, we can get off this call right now, because I have served the public. I was in the military, and I'm trying to tell you that kind of business acumen is not good for the public trust. It can't be, because it's always one-sided. And sometimes as a leader, you have to lose for your people to win. And he does not have that in him.
Well, so I guess the question is, well, okay. So your question, what is your question? What was your question? You just said.
My question is how does that business acumen serve the public trust?
Okay.
How
boom.
does that serve being a police officer, a president, a congressman, anything,
gotcha.
if it's so one-sided? If your business acumen is for you to only take a deal if you win, and I'm going to put something in place to protect me if I lose. Now, but if you lose, what happens to the rest of these people? I don't care, as long as I don't.
Well, not people, the lender, which is the bank, which is
Yes, but all
going
those
to
people
government.
that worked on those buildings and those projects now don't get their check
Wait,
because he filed
whoa.
bankruptcy.
Hold on. What if, but so here's what we don't know. What if that project required more resources than anticipated? And if he didn't file bankruptcy and lower the interest rate,
Yes,
he wouldn't have enough to actually pay the people on the project. And so in order to actually be able to fund the project and the workers that are taking care of the project, he had to get the money from somewhere. And so the first place, one way that he does that is by lowering the interest rate from the bank. By the way, the bank, and in the Bible, it says in the parable of talents, it says anybody who takes, so in the parable of talents, it's basically if you're given something, right, you're responsible for growing into your capability, right?
Yes.
And so really the question is, the bank is reaping where it's not sowing. It's just lending money. And by the way, it's not even the bank's money. It's our money that we keep in the bank.
Yes, it is.
The bank just
You're
re-lends
correct.
it out, or it's the government's money from the Fedwire transfer that the banks do through Fedwire, where they lend the money out. So the bank is making money on money that's not theirs.
So
why can the bank, can the bank be a victim in this?
No.
And who is the bankruptcy negatively affecting? Is it negatively affecting? So if Trump, who's facilitating this entire deal, creating some form of value in his development projects and also putting a lot of people to work, which puts money in their pockets in the form of value, if that is that negatively affected by the banks lowering their interest rates and him using tactics to do that? Because it ultimately it's more money to the banks or more money to the project, which helps Trump, it helps the deal, it helps the project, and it helps the workers.
Okay, so if you know that's an American banker tactic, why do you keep doing it over and over and over again? But yet you keep making more and more money with all these people losing behind you doing that. If that's and this is what I mean by that. Okay.
Well, who's losing?
Donald Trump is not a 25-year-old entrepreneur that's doing this and looking good doing it. He is old. He's been doing this for years. So if the tactic works, it's legal. Hey, it's good. What I'm saying is again, who is it serving? And how do you convert that into serving the public trust as a leader? Because a lot of times there has to be compromise. His position as a businessman does not allow compromise. It does not. And I understand what you're saying about, what the banks are doing, and that's kind of wrong. And, nobody should just keep people on just so they can keep their jobs. If you got to pay all this interest and you don't have real money coming in, I get the argument. But what I'm saying is this is an experienced man, art of the deal. That's his template, though. He has more businesses and made more money doing that than, look at University, Trump Steaks. He has businesses that are not real estate. Okay. And he's done that tactic on all those businesses. And you trying to tell me he's 50-something years old and he hasn't figured out a way to take a actual idea, convert it into a project, and get it done without blaming the banks for interest rates?
Well, I don't know if it's blaming the banks. I think it's just smart business. It's like, why would you leave money on the table to the banks?
But that's what I'm saying. All that experience, and you trying to tell me him and all those lawyers couldn't come up a way to come up with a business concept where he wouldn't have to file bankruptcy.
I'm just here chilling with my man K-Dog.